right, everybody. Welcome to Aviation for Girls Engage e-learning. We're so happy that you were able to join us. I've launched the first poll, and the question is, do you feel comfortable using power tools such as a drill, sander, or saw? Yes, I have used power tools before. I have not had the opportunity to use power tools. I don't know how to use power tools and I'm nervous to try. So you can go ahead and answer our poll while we wait for everybody to get joined. And in the meantime, I'm Annie Steichleather. I'm the manager of youth programs, and we're here for Engage e-learning, Propellers and Rotors. So this is a super exciting Engage e-learning that connects to Girls in Aviation Day. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and end that poll and we can share the results. So you can see it's actually pretty split, equally split, 33% on each answer. So some of us have used power tools, some have not had the opportunity, and some of us are a little nervous. Before we get fully started, just remember our customs. We're going to respect everyone. We are recording so that you can watch it later. Please use the Q&A and show us your reactions. Be thoughtful about your question. So if someone asks a question and you ask the same question, make sure you listen to each other. Raise your hand, and the most important part, let's have fun. Here is our agenda. We're working on the introductions now. We have an amazing guest specialist, Alaina Lewis. We will have our Q&A after Alaina gives her presentation. And I have an awesome activity for you that is connected to the Aviation for Girls propeller. So if you got a propeller from the Girls in Aviation Day kit, we're going to do a continuation of that. And we have some closing announcements, including a new contest. All right, so without further ado, here is myself, Annie Steichleather. I'm the manager of youth programs. With us, we have Kelly Murphy. Kelly, do you want to say hi?
Yes, welcome everybody. We're so thrilled that you're here with us tonight for Engage e-learning. Annie and Alaina are going to have a fabulous session with you all, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Kelly. And also with us, we have Rory, who's our chapter relations specialist, and she also does a lot with management. She works on your junior memberships. So thanks for joining us, Rory. And most important, our guest specialist today is Alaina Lewis. She is a propeller designer. I'm going to go ahead and spotlight Alaina. And manufacturer. She works for Culver Props. Alaina, do you want to share a little bit about your story?
Sure. So I kind of got into the prop business as kind of a family business. My grandpa was a crop duster, and when he lost his medical due to his heart attack, he didn't have, the ability to fly normal airplanes anymore. But back at that time, you could build what was called an ultralight. So an ultralight is an airplane that you don't have to have a license for. And since he didn't have his license, that fit perfectly. He was also a mechanical engineer. So he designed his own airplane. So growing up, my nights and weekends were spent down at the hangar with dad and grandpa, doing whatever they needed to be done. I kind of joked and said, if you want to spend time with dad, you better grab a wrench, because that's how you were going to get time with him, was to be working with what he was working on. So they made and designed their own airplane, and grandpa flew his own airplane that him and my dad built to Oshkosh. And when we were at Oshkosh, in the ultralight area, you get to fly every morning and every evening. So they went and they were flying, and somebody goes, "Is that the best takeoff you can do?" And of course, like, that was it for my grandpa. He's an engineer. So he went back home on a mission. He was going to design the best takeoff performance airplane you could ever ask for. So the way he did that was he made what's called a prop speed reduction unit. And what that is whenever a normal VW engine, which a VW engine is what we used, is can swing a 62-inch propeller. So your diameter can only be 62 inches due to your tip speed restrictions. But he put a gearbox on it that let him swing a 96-inch prop. So 96 is huge. And he went up the next year and just, I mean, took off almost straight up, and the little safety guys on the ground are like, "You can't do that, you can't do that." And he's, I only had to do it once, just had to prove my point. um, but that propeller he had got from Culver Props, and they had designed it specifically for him and his needs. No one else out there was running a VW with a reduction drive, so it was a very specific need, and Culver designed that for him. So whenever he called to order another prop, they said, "I'm sorry, we went out of business, we're not doing it anymore." And he said, "But I need that prop that you designed for me. It was, you know, the best propeller you could ask for." And he said, "Can I buy your company?" And they said yes. So that was in 2000. I graduated high school in 2004. Whenever I graduated high school, I went to college. I didn't really know what I wanted to be, but everyone was going to college, so that's what I did. I didn't like being away from home. I didn't like being away from the shop. I didn't know what I was going to do. I was spending all this money being in college, and so I said, I think I'm going to come home. So I came home and I finished my associates in business. But while I was taking college classes at home, in between classes, I would go to the shop and, you know, again, make yourself useful, right? So I would take out the trash, I would clean stuff, I would go get them lunch, I would answer the phone calls, I would mail packages, I would wrap the finished props, just kind of whatever needed to be done, loose ends. You know, if a prop is big enough, they need extra help with the glue. So I'd help them with the glue. Well, then I could glue them up by myself. So I just kind of started adding more and more and more, being more and more helpful. And then if you'll see on this machine, there's a lot of things that need to be tightened, and it's all bolted together. So when my grandpa had carpal tunnel surgery done on his wrist, he could not work that machine. So I got to do that for him. Um, so you can see there, that's what our patterns look like. So I just kind of started doing more and more at the shop, and to the point where when grandpa passed away in 2016, I was able to start running the shop by myself. I had two little kids, my two daughters. They were 8 and I think 7 at the time. And my 85-year-old grandma came to the shop every day and watched them. And so I raised my kids in the shop. So my girls were raised in the shop the same way I was raised in a shop. And we just made it work. So the process of building the propeller is relatively, I wouldn't say simple, but when you have enough experience, you know, it just becomes pretty routine. The machine that you see here is our tracing lathe. So this is we don't use a CNC machine. And I get that question a lot. Why aren't you using a CNC machine? Well, I like this old machine. It doesn't have a computer, so my computer never breaks down. My computer never needs to be worked on. Time-wise, it actually takes about the same amount of time as a CNC machine. I can make my adjustments a lot faster. From what I can tell, because I don't know a lot about CNC machines, the difference would be that if I used one of those, the finish would come out a little better, and maybe I wouldn't have to sand as much. But it's like the sanding doesn't take a whole lot of time. So I don't know, but I do know that this has worked. It's worked for a long time. I know how to use it. It doesn't give me any trouble. So this is my preferred method. Even though it's old school, it's proven and tried and true. There's a lot to be said for that. So as you can see, there's a lot of tightening. So every time I take this in and out, all these nuts and bolts have to be tightened. And that's the part that grandpa couldn't do with the surgery on his wrist, which is how I kind of snuck my way in there. He really didn't want to let go of the lathe. Like, it's a wonderful machine to use. And when it's yours, you know, when you're the one that's in charge of it, you kind of have this relationship with your equipment. My husband jokes that no one should be allowed to touch that machine except for me and my grandpa because it's kind of finicky and you have to really know what you're doing. So, um, but basically, I pick a pattern based on what my customer wants. And I take that pattern and I put it in the top. I have about 300 patterns, so I have a lot to pick from. Even still, I still have to make some sometimes, like my grandpa's custom propeller that Culver made for us. But the pattern goes on the top and then my blank goes on the bottom. And this is a blank that I've glued up, a couple days before. But this is a tracing lathe that essentially it's just going to run like a corkscrew all the way down it. And it's going to just kind of spiral cut. People on social media joke everything that's not a propeller. It cuts off everything that's not a propeller. But I kind of like to think of it as it kind of unwrapping a present, a propeller present. Um, it's it's a fairly loud machine. I do have to make sure I wear ear protection and eye protection and things like that. But in all honesty, it's not a hard machine to use. I was terrified to change those blades on it. I was like, I can't do that. And then my dad's like, sure you can, Alaina. Here you go. This is how you do it. And now I even do all the maintenance on it and I change the saw blades on it and I completely run it by myself. So that was a something that I had to overcome. Like the first poll question we asked, I was comfortable using small tools, but I was not comfortable using big tools and changing out big saw blades and things like that. But thankfully, I got some practice, and they helped me get through that. So um, this picture is the one where I'm standing in front of that prop. That blank probably weighed 100 pounds. And I did that all by myself. Um, the thing is, you don't have to pick up all 100 pounds. If you drag it, you only have to pick up half that. And sometimes it's about being smarter. As a girl working in something that, stuff is exceptionally heavy or things like that, you have to find a workaround. So my grandpa had a torn rotator cuff in both shoulders. And things were hard for him. So he taught me a lot of neat tricks of how to, move heavy things without, hurting yourself or move heavy things when you didn't have the strength to do it, finding a different way to do it. You can get really creative and don't think that it's like, it's too heavy for me, I can't do it. There is always, always a workaround. There's always a way to do it, even if you don't have help. I work in the shop by myself. So what you see being done, I mean, sometimes I'll say, hey, Dad, can you come help me? But sometimes he's just not available. And to be honest, I'm just not very patient. When I feel like I want to do it, I want to do it. So I go ahead and find a way around it. But you just, make sure that being a girl doesn't stop you from doing heavy lifting or something like that, something that may look intimidating, you can still do it. So that's important. Oh, there's a picture of my grandpa. So that was at Oshkosh, and that was the propeller that he had designed behind us. So that was a great picture. And you'll also see all of the props over here. So as you can see, they're every single different color and diameter and even rotation, right hand and left hand rotation. These are all specific to what the customer needs. In experimental aviation, so I make experimental propellers, but when stuff is experimental, that means they can put like any engine they want on any airframe that they want. So there isn't like a part number. In certified stuff, it is a part number. It'll actually say propeller number XYZ. In experimental aviation, you don't really have that. And I think we have some pictures of that later of some of the different kinds of aircraft that they go on. But I can have a Pete and Pole is a very classic airplane design. And people put A65 Continentals, they put like Homings on them, they'll put a Corvair on them, they'll put a Werner radial engine on it, they will put a VW engine on it. And all of those different engines means that they require a different propeller for every single one. So even though it's like I need a prop for my Pete and Pole. Yeah, what engine do you have? How much horsepower does it have? What are your requirements? Do you have a tree at the end of your runway? Do we need to look more towards climb? So all those things is what I'm able to provide to customers to give the very, very most perfect prop for their project. Um, a lot of these have maple and mahogany on them. And the maple and the mahogany is actually a German design. In World War I, almost all German-made propellers were dark and light laminations. And that's kind of how we got started is we did a lot of stuff for World War I replicas, and they would make their plane look absolutely authentic, but they couldn't find an authentic propeller to put on it. And that's one of the reasons, or one of the ways that we help out the aviation industry is that we are able to deliver a propeller that is specific exactly to what the customer needs, looks wise and performance wise. We can blend those together so that they have a beautiful, performing, authentic propeller. For the most part, I mean, World War I props were incredibly long, and a lot of these need a little shorter prop, but I can make it. In the picture, it looks the same. This is a good example. This is a Newport, I believe it's a Newport 17, and that is I believe a VW engine on that. I can't remember right offhand, but that's at a World War One rendezvous picnic that they have where they all get out their World War One planes and fly with them. And I got to make the prop. That one is stained. I get to stain them to look, old and authentic. And the one on the other side is actually a mahogany propeller, and that has a scimitar profile. And most of the planes like the Sopwith Camel and the SE5, they had this really beautiful scimitar look to it. So that's that prop is 90 inches actually. It's all made of mahogany, and that's actually a profile that my grandpa built. Someone wanted that profile for their plane, and grandpa hand built that from scratch. So
It's
if,
beautiful.
yeah, if we don't have a pattern, we can make one. And I'll take a pattern that's close and I just add Bondo to it until I've made the profile I want. So we're still making and recreating patterns from scratch too.
So when you
So
make a pattern, how how does the process change a little bit? Because with the lathe, it copies it from top and below, but when you do a pattern, are you really more crafting by hand?
yes, and because thankfully that tracing lathe will duplicate it equally on both sides, so I only have to make one blade. And as long as of course, I need to make sure that a third of the way back from the leading edge, it has the um, it has the thickest airfoil. I need to make sure it has a thin trailing edge. I need to make sure that the pitch is correct, things like that. So I have some parameters that I stick to, but also I'm very free to make, whatever design I want. Some are more efficient than others and will perform better than others, but I can kind of make whatever I want to, which is great. That's a lot of fun. And then it just has to be equal on both sides, right? So I have the one blade and it'll duplicate that on both sides of that prop. And as long as both sides are symmetrical, we're good. So it has it's a lot of fun. And that's what grandpa loved about it, was getting to design what he thought would work best. This actually is this is a prop overseas. This one went to, I want to say Serbia, but I can't remember exactly. But that is over there, and that's a radial engine. You can see all the multiple cylinders there. That's actually a Werner radial from the Czech Republic. And that was a really beautiful prop. The mahogany, like sometimes you get lumber that is better than others, and the mahogany in that one was just like so on point. It was one of my favorite props. So and then over here on this other side, what's in the lathe is actually the actual propeller that was on the last slide. flash it in my head earlier for you, but that is, so I do a rough cut and then I do a final cut. So this is a final cut where I've set the pitch and this is giving it its last perfect cut. And then from there, it's all handwork and hand sanding from that point on. It may take me, like 6 or 8 hours to sand one out and completely finish it up. So it's a long process. It's about a 6, 7 day process to make a prop because you can't do, like, gluing up is one day. It maybe take just a couple hours to glue one up, but then it's got to set in the press for 14 hours. So there's a lot of stuff you can only do one step of the process per day, but it takes about 6 days to make an entire propeller.
Wow, that's awesome. And how many propellers would you say you make a month?
A month, probably maybe 15, depending on the size. Like this 90-inch one will take me a full day, maybe a day and a half to sand. And then something small like a 54-inch will take me half a day. So yeah, I try to mix them up though, because after I do a big one like that, like I'm tired. So then I give myself a break and do a little one.
Yeah, that makes sense. Or if you were gluing all morning, maybe you'll do a little sanding in the afternoon, right?
Yeah,
Switch it up.
absolutely.
I love that.
Alaina, can I ask, is it hard to find the wood to make all these propellers? How do you find the wood and how do you get it supplied?
Sure. So our shop is actually down at my mom and dad's house, and we're kind of out in the middle of the woods. So we don't the the lumber truck can't get to our house. So I meet them at the gas station and I load it all into my truck and then drive it down to my mom and dad's house and then I unload it again. But lumber is hard to find on your like 90-inch props. On the 90-inch props, they are hard to find. Clear wood, because you can't have any defects. You can't have any knots. You can't have any cracks. You can't have anything like that. So um, the like little bitty props are easy. You can cut around knots and stuff like that. But finding a good solid board and finding, well, 4 of them or 5 of them to make a whole prop that's 90 inches long can be time consuming. And it's a little irritating for the customer and honestly for me too. But my lumber company does do a good job. But that's the way it works. So if I get really good boards, I'll set those aside till I have enough to make a big one. In the meantime, I'm going to be making my little ones that I can, are easier to get out of lumber. So it's I wouldn't call it like a huge problem in my process, but it definitely is something that takes some planning in my process. Oh, so this is the bandsaw. Um, a lot of people, bandsaw is my favorite. This part is actually my favorite here. And
I
it
love it. I've used a bandsaw once when I had woodworking class.
yeah. And I'm super, super careful. People will be like, how are you, like, what's your trick? How are you so careful? And I said, well, I always keep my fingernails painted because if you're worried about chipping your nail polish, you don't get it caught in a bandsaw. So,
Oh, that's cute. But I also noticed that you do small, careful little cuts, so as to not overcut.
right. So I take little chunks and that makes it easier. And a sharp bandsaw blade makes it easier too. A dull blade means that you're putting a lot of pressure on it and you're pushing really hard to make it cut. And then that means when you slip, you also have a lot of forward pressure. So keeping a bandsaw sharp um, is is a good it's a good thing to do because it just cuts so much smoother and easier. And you just take your time. You can't rush anything when you do much of any crafting. You have to just take your time and not rush it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then that also leads into how much do you take care of the lathe? How much do you take care of your bandsaw? Do you have a ritual at the end of a day to clean up and take care of the shop?
Um, my biggest thing that I do is I vacuum every day and I clean every day. And that's because like, with sawdust is fire hazard. So I try to keep all the sawdust cleaned up as much as I can because I don't want to slip and I don't want to fall and I don't want to um it's a fire hazard as well. But other than that, I kind of just try to pay attention. I listen to my equipment a lot. Your equipment will tell you what it needs. So I listen to if it squeaks a little bit, okay, let's find out what that is. If it's like, oh, yep, that blade was pulling a little hard, new blade. Um, on the lathe, if it starts giving me a little ridge, that means I'm not cutting smoothly. I need new blades. So that's kind of I just do it on how my equipment is reacting.
Yeah,
And on
absolutely.
yeah, so on this sander, it's a pretty aggressive sander, so that's like 60 grit sandpaper, which takes everything off really quickly, but it gives me a nice smooth hub. And that blend from the hub to the blade is what took me the absolute longest to conquer. I had such a hard time with that. um, but uh, I eventually got it. I mean, it took like a couple years, but I finally got that nice blend
You
where
just
you
kept
don't gouge into your
trying,
blade. Yeah.
working at it.
So
Lena, you had a question. Does the type of wood matter?
yes. So a lot of people say, why don't you make it out of oak? Well, oak is very heavy. My go-to lumber is hard white maple. That is the strongest, best wood you can use. But I do use the mahogany like you see here for people who want that World War I look, or sometimes they just like it because it's pretty, the two-toned look. And mahogany is lightweight and also very strong, very easy to work with. It sands a little faster than your maple, so when you sand it, you have to be very careful because it'll sand faster, so you'll get a dip if you're not careful at that glue line. So, um, but with enough practice, you can mitigate that a little bit. But yeah, hard white maple and sometimes birch. I have used birch before and I like that. That's a very common aircraft, airplane wood or propeller wood. And then also I've used a little bit of cherry, but not too much. So that's the lumbers that I like.
Awesome question. Thank you, Olivia, for that question.
Yeah.
So right here, you're sanding, and part of sanding is balancing. Is that correct?
Yes, these props have to be balanced vertically and horizontally. So when I balance horizontally, I'm going to take material off the blades. When I balance vertically, I'm going to take material off the hub area here. A lot of people are like, how do you get it the same on both sides? Well, I do my best, but then when I balance it, it tells me how good I did. And then I may have to come back and work on it. Balancing will take the most time. It may take 2 or 3 hours when it took, maybe on a half VW, it may take me 4 hours to sand out the whole prop, and then I'll have to spend 2 hours balancing it, which is kind of crazy, but it's that important. It should be able to just sit there on the balancing stand and just stay still. And that's when you're perfectly balanced, and a perfectly balanced propeller will run smoothly. If your prop's running rough, it's either out of tracking on the tips, it's out of balance, or your pitch is different on each blade. So those are the things you have to worry about whenever you are sanding. You don't want to change the pitch because they have to be perfect on both blades. You want to take same material off both sides so it's balanced. And you want to make sure you have a nice flat hub and don't sand too much on one tip or the other because then your tip is out of tracking. Those are the three reasons why your prop would run rough.
Wow. Awesome. Really amazing. And then in terms of a kind of airworthiness, I know that these are experimental, but what would make someone need to get a replacement, or how long do they typically last in terms of runtime?
Sure. So a propeller can last up to 10 years. And how long it lasts is directly proportionate to how well you take care of it. I've seen people have them for a couple weeks and completely trash them because they'll run them through the weeds, they'll run them through grass, they will leave them out in the rain, they will leave them out in the sun. All those things are bad for propellers. But you can take good care of them and they can last 10 years. If you see any moisture or anything like that, have them refinished and they can last a really long time. I tell people they're good until you hit something with them.
And that's the same with propellers that you were talking about too. They're good
Yeah, yeah.
until they have a prop strike, right?
Yeah.
Awesome.
But some of them don't come out, like they won't balance or something like that. Or when I cut them, I'll find a knot in them, and then I sell those as non-airworthy. So people will buy them just for wall hangers. So I
Yeah.
do have some non-airworthy props that people buy them, or if like when someone solos, they'll buy it for them for a gift with the solo
Oh,
date stamped on it, or a graduation gift or something like that. And wedding guest books. They write, everybody
wow.
signs the back of the prop for a wedding guest book. So all my non-airworthies that I mess up, they still get used, which makes me feel good.
Yeah, of course, because you spend so much time on it. So having a purpose and a meaning is important in the work. I love it.
Yeah.
And speaking of solos, I heard that you were working on a license. Do you want to share a little bit about that with our attendees? Some
Oh,
inspiration?
yes. So I started and then I took a little bit of a break. We actually couldn't find a glue manufacturer, so I took a break from flying until I got that under control, found a new glue manufacturer, and then caught up on orders and then went back. So there was like a year gap in my flying, but I just finished my night time and I did a night cross country, which was beautiful and amazing and overwhelming a little bit. It was, uh, it, I'm not a particularly brave person. So a lot of this for my flying has been like, oh my gosh, that was so scary. Like my instructor had me land without any airport lights on, just so I'd know how to do it if I ever needed to. And that
Wow,
was
that's
okay.
great.
Yeah, that one was not scary actually, because the lights on the airplane lighted up the
Right.
paint on the runway.
Yeah.
But then I did not do well on my airplane lights were all off, but I had runway lights. That one I did not do well on. I did not do well.
Well,
um
but it sounds like you have an amazing instructor that would put you in these situations so that you could learn where you could practice and improve.
Right, right. So, I kind of joke because, being just a girl in aviation and just um, the things you go through, uh, I am a little bit more emotional. So, I mean, I have days where like I leave the shop and I just like I'm squalling. I'm like, everything was bad. I did everything bad. I had flight lessons where I left and I was just bawling. I'm never gonna make it. I'm never gonna make it. And this weekend, hopefully, I do my solo cross country. And so it's like, all those times I thought I wasn't gonna make it or I wasn't cut out for it. I just had a bad day. So but there's always going to be days like that. There's always going to be days like that. And you have to remind yourself it's not because I'm not supposed to be here. It's just because I had a bad day and everybody has bad days.
Yeah, and it's getting up and trying it again the next day when you're feeling better, right?
Yeah. So, and that's what I did. Then I went back the next day. I had some really good landings and he goes, that was really good. And I'm like, thank goodness.
I had
So,
days like that too. When I
yeah,
was
like
when I was in the middle of
getting
it, I was like, "Ooh, yesterday was really bad. Okay, let's try again."
yeah. And I think so many people get discouraged if they have a bad day or even a few bad days in a row, they get super discouraged. But that was me, that was me. I did have sometimes a lot of bad days in a row, but I just kept at it. And yeah, now I'm sending props all over the world. So it'll work out if you hang in there.
Yeah, just hang in there. I love that. Amazing message. So we
Yeah.
have another poll to launch. And what part of making a propeller is most interesting to you? So Alaina helped me with our questions here. So that first step is preparing the wood where you glue it. What kind of glue do you use?
It's actually just a powder and water mix, and it's really nice and easy to work with. And it's it just has a part number, so it doesn't really have a name. But I get it from CP Adhesives, and it's just a powder water mix, and you have 20 minutes. 20 minutes to get that in the
Oh,
press. Yeah, that's it's what they call a pot life. So after I mix the powder and water together, I have 20 minutes before it starts setting up. And then I have to put it in the lathe for 14 hours at about 75 psi.
wow.
So so when I have a bigger prop, I don't have the time. So I really do have to ask for help for that. But my kids are old enough now. I'm like, come help your mom.
I love
My
that.
daughters get their little glue rollers out, and all three of us are having some mother-daughter time here.
Oh, fun. Working fast. And then
Yeah.
we talked about setting up the lathe. We saw the bandsaw. We saw the sanding and balancing. And then the stains and varnish. That's that last finishing step. What kind of stain do you use, Alaina?
So I use an alcohol-based stain. I find that to be the best choice for something that's as dense of a wood as hard maple, because it will really penetrate the wood, and it also dries like pretty instantly. So within a few minutes, I'm ready to put a sealer coat on there, and they get 2 sealer coats, and they're antimicrobial, antifungal. Really just does a really good job of seeping into all the pores and getting that sealed up for longevity, like we had talked about. And then they get a top coat that's similar to kind of a countertop. So a scratch resistant, super hard,
Oh, great.
kind of countertop top coat. And the alcohol space stain though is really, and then I had them custom mix my stain, because like I said, that's actually kind of like the super fun part, is that I get to play and customize everything. So I'm like, I want a dark kind of brown, but I don't want walnut because that's too flat, and I don't want mahogany because that's too red and it looks fake. And I'm like, can you mix those together for me? And they're like, yeah, sure. So they mixed them together, so I have a very, like, a deep, rich, um kind of red velvet chocolate color.
Ooh, I
But
love that.
it looks like old expensive furniture is what it looks like. So
Yes.
I'm happy with it, and my customers seem to love it too, which is even better.
That's we always want to make the customers happy, right?
Absolutely.
There are two people that can go ahead and answer the poll if you want. I'll leave it up just for a minute before we end it. And now we're going to transition. Elena's going to stay with us. She may need to help me explain some parts of the propeller. If you want to get your materials ready for the tail wheel, just a reminder, this I gave to you in advance to prepare, because this is a longer activity. So if you did not get a chance to put this together yet, no worries. There are videos on Aviation for Girls app, but I'm actually going to be putting together the frame. So it's, if you look at this little airplane here, we're going to make this little back wheel, the front wheel, and then a wooden popsicle stick's going to go through here. So this part will make kind of the covering that is this purple part here. So go ahead and get your materials together. And in the meantime, we're going to go a little bit over. You heard some of these words. So the pitch, right, of the blade here, and blades similar to like the front of the wings, they have a camber, so a curve to them. And what happens when the propeller rotates, all right, so it rotates, it creates thrust, which pulls the airplane forward, but at the same time, it also creates lift, because this airflow wraps around the plane and the air kind of divides over the wing and produces an upward force of lift. So there's your thrust and lift. Alaina, do you have anything you want to add to this part that I might be missing? Here's our pitch or blade angle that we're talking about.
So your pitch is actually inches of pitch. And if a propeller had a pitch of, let's say, 30, that means for every rotation of that propeller, you are going to go 30 inches forward.
Oh,
So inches of pitch and the angle of the blade are two different things.
yes.
I measure the angle of the blade and put it into a formula to give me inches of pitch. And then that inches of pitch means for every single rotation, you will go that many inches forward. And the higher the pitch, generally the faster the airplane.
Got it. Awesome. And you were also talking about adjusting the pitch, adjust your climb, correct?
Yes. So if a customer says, I have a tree at the end of my runway and I need to get off the ground quick, I'll say, then I'm going to give you a couple inches lower than I would give somebody else, so that that lower pitch is going to let you climb better and faster and turn up more RPM and get a little more power out so you can clear that obstacle.
I love that. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right, everybody. So I'm going to play this. This is the time lapse of how I put this together, so you can watch it first. And then I'm going to switch over to my camera. So first, and you can go ahead and get started. First, you want to measure 2 popsicle sticks at 2.5 inches. And then if you want to cut them, you can cut them using the back of your scissors. And then with the other 2 popsicle sticks, so you need 4 in total, you're just going to make one long. Much slower. So this is just to get your mind in, how do I do this? And that part is hooked so that we can hook the rubber band. And the rubber band winding is actually what's going to make it so cool, because it's going to rotate the propeller. So this part is our tail wheel. It's a little tricky one, but I'm going to go over it with you. And this is the front hook for the other end of the rubber band. So we add that to the front. And then here is our propeller, and that is going to go through that front hook. inches. All right, so I'm gonna switch cameras here. There we go. Okay, you can see me. All right, so I went ahead and I colored this first, and then I put it all together. So I have that ready, and that was part of the directions to put this together. So if you did not get to put it together, that's okay. There are directions on the app and on YouTube, and at the top when you print this from the app. So in the meantime, the first step, like I said, we're going to go ahead and measure 2 popsicle sticks at 2.5 inches. So line them up, and I used green this time so that you could see my marks a little better. Here we go. Because we want them to be the same length. All right. Then use the very, very back of your scissors. And if you want, you can even do a little X here. So you know this is the smaller end. We're not using that. And you can use the very back of your scissors and gently squeeze. Alaina might have some better tools for this, but
Yeah, I go to the bandsaw for that one.
I know I don't have a mini bandsaw, so we'll have to work on that. And then we'll put those aside. And we will need this, so we'll leave that there. Our next step is to make that one long popsicle stick. So we're going to extend that. And just add a little bit of hot glue. Now be very careful because our hot glue is hot. So what I like to do is have a little piece of scrap wood so that I don't touch it. And instead of pressing with my hands, I press with that little piece of scrap wood. And that helps me. So we'll let that cool. Put those to the side. While that's cooling, you actually can mark this at 1.5 inches from the front. So that's right there. So we'll need that mark later, and then we can put the ruler aside. All right, our next step is we're going to get the axle, which is this, and our 2 wheels. Whoop, it may be hard to see. And before you do anything, you probably want to make sure that they slide in, because it took me a little strength to push them on. Okay, and then make sure it rolls smoothly. And what we're going to do is measure our straw so that it sits in the axle. So we don't want it to be longer. We want it to be shorter than the axle. So I'm probably going to measure it right about there. I'm going to make a little mark. That's good. And we're going to cut the straw too. Okay. So now we get the fun part, which is making this landing gear. So what we're going to do is kind of create a triangle. And then this is going to go in the middle. So first work with this section. And use your hot glue. And just add a teeny drop on either end. Be very careful. When you're using hot glue, sometimes it gives these little spider webs. So sometimes I use a plastic mat or something so it doesn't get stuck to my paper. But then you'll attach these little pieces, and you want them to be a triangle. And you can just let them cool that way for the moment. You may need a little more glue up on the front here. And it's okay if you drop a little, it'll cool. And then once it's cool, just pull that off. Okay, so we're going to let that cool for just a minute. And in the meantime, I have my straw. We can start working on some of the paper clips. So for the back, with one paper clip, you're going to just open it up just like that. It's very easy. And for this one, I'll use a blue one. So open that up, and that's going to be the hook for the rubber band. So it will go back here. So I'll let that there for you to see it. I think this is dry enough. Yes. So now this part's a little bit tricky because what I like to do is put the glue between both pieces and then kind of tap it. And then there's a little bit of a gap, and that's where we're going to add at that mark we made. The 1.5-inch mark right there. So you want to balance that and wait for it to cool. Okay. And that is what's creating our landing gear. So I'm going to let that cool. I may again want a little bit more hot glue on the sides here. And we'll let that cool. All right, so I've prepared this paper clip. That's for the back. And we made it look like this. So while that's cooling, I'm going to prepare the paper clip for the front, which is the hook. I'm going to use a blue one for that too. So for this one, we're going to open it all the way up. Okay. We're going to fold it in half and we're going to twist. You also may want to make a little loop like a fish. So there's that kind of fish loop. And then hold the top of the fish and just twist it all the way down. Then you'll bend it up, which it may already do for you. And that's going to be at the front. Just like that. All right. How's this? It's solid. So now we can take that axle from our wheel and we're going to slide that into the straw. We're going to put a wheel on one end. Well, maybe. Sometimes the wheels need a little bit of force. We need a hammer. So just push them on the table. There you go. All right, so that's one end, and then we'll do the other. All right, so at this point, you should be getting some movement. So it should roll. If it doesn't roll, it's likely that your straw is a little bit too long. So just do your best to trim it. We can go ahead and glue our paper clips to the back. So I have some stragglers. So first we'll do this one, our little blue. There you go. And like I said, do not touch the hot glue. So if you need to hold it down, use another piece of a popsicle stick and just it'll help you press it down while the glue cools. All right, so that's at the front. Then we'll add this to this side. So while these cool, we can start working on the wheel in the back. So I'll go ahead and put that up front so you can see what it looks like. It's a U shape. So open a paper clip all the way in the front. And then use your wooden axle, which is this. Line it up and you're gonna really kind of rotate this around. So pull these back. Like so. And that's going to create your loop for the axle. All right. And you can either trim the extra or you can continue to wrap it around. It depends on your hand strength. So I already trimmed this one. And you're just going to loop it, put your wheel in the middle, make sure it rotates. And to close it, you're going to add one little bead to the end. That way it doesn't slide off. So we'll let that cool. Let's check this one. It should be ready. Yep. It looks like they just need a little more hot glue. Get those to cool. On your materials, I also put a low heat hot glue, so it's less likely to hurt you. So we'll let those cool, and we have our tail wheel ready. So the last step is to prepare our propeller. So here's our Aviation for Girls propeller. You need one more paper clip. And we're going to open this paper clip up and thread it through that hole in the propeller. You can also use this propeller to twist and fly, and the thrust is going to pull it upwards because of the pitch. Where is that? Here is a finished one so that you can copy it. All right, so you want to pull this through kind of halfway and do one twist. This should be a tight twist here. Because you want, when you rotate the propeller, you want it to rotate the wire. Then you take your other bead. You're going to string that through it. And you're going to twist it around the bead. That bead is so that the propeller doesn't pull through this loop. Then you can kind of keep twisting all the way until you get to the end. And then what we're going to do is we're going to thread it through this loop here. Make sure it rotates. Everything's good. And then you're going to make a hook. And that hook is for your rubber band. So it does take a little bit of wiggling, but you'll get there. And you just want to make sure that it will kind of rotate freely. All right, at this point, this should be dry. And we're going to attach this to the back like that so that it rotates. That's our tail wheel. You probably want to hold that. Hold that there. If you want to pinch it too so that it's snug, you can do that. And add a little bit more glue so it doesn't wiggle. All right. Last step before we add our awesome tail wheel paper part is to add some rubber bands. So the rubber bands are going to attach here and to the back. And you need at least 2. Sometimes you need 3. Then you're going to rotate that propeller. Hold that there. And this is where you may want to make sure this is pinched really close. Okay, so rotate it so that rubber band twist and twist and twist. And then let it go so that it releases completely. So if you're having trouble, it means that your loop up here is too small. All right. What you'll do next, you'll go ahead and you'll glue this on top. Once you get it rotating freely, it may take some finishing, some balancing, like Alaina has to do on her propeller.
Absolutely.
And then it will pull forward. So let me get one that is ready to go here. So you can rotate it. and it'll launch. Oh, this one's rubber bands are old. But it will launch. Just give yourself patience and grace. There we go. There you go. So that's how they're supposed to work, and I hope you had fun. Before you go, just a reminder, we will be announcing our Halloween costume contest. So please feel free to check the Aviation for Girls app and see what the rules are. And Alaina, it was amazing to have you. I learned so much about propellers. Thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Well, thank you for having me. This was great. And if anybody has any questions or anything, have a Facebook and an Instagram and a YouTube that they can go and they can look at. And if they want to learn more, or I'm always open to any kind of questions or anything any of the girls need.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alaina. We so appreciate that. And I hope everybody had fun. If you have any questions about building the tail wheel, we're going to have all of the answers on the Aviation for Girls app under aircraft. All right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Alaina.
Thanks, Alaina. Thank you,
Yep.
Angie.
Welcome.